much right during this time, but she literally is my left arm, right arm. She fits anybody, and I know some of you guys are like thinking about trying to be an executive pastor. She is the best executive pastoral role that I have ever been a part of. And I want you to know, one of the coolest gifts that Angela did for me when she came on was like, hey Kevin, you keep throwing airplanes in the sky. You throw as many airplanes, I will land them. I'm like, really?
Wow.
She goes, I don't need stage time, I don't need anything. You throw ideas,
Wow.
and I will land those airplanes. Guys,
Woo!
that, she has a heart to serve. She knows her shape. She studied so many. I mean, she has so many degrees. It's ridiculous. She's really Asian. She's going for her fourth master's. Not done with that one. She was thinking about doing D-Min. I'm like, Angela, just I'm gonna keep throwing airplanes. So I keep her busy. And one of the cool things is at Saddleback, we're Southern Baptist affiliated. Women in leadership, pastoral leadership, is very rare. It's almost sometimes frowned upon, but it's mostly because in our church, it's mostly because, just we're trying to build boundaries because most of our leadership is male figurehead. And so probably, just to give some conversations with us men here, don't be afraid, don't be shy. I wanted to make sure that she was one of our base pastors, a director position, where she is in charge of all ministry and missions of our we build our own bases, you guys know that. But the conversation was, we had to go all the way up to the elders. And this is at the RIC level, and all the elders of our church say, hey, is it time to uplift our women in leadership roles?
There you go.
They gave us a couple, the parameters to keep safeguards is to make sure that, if this happens, make sure under the leadership and the oversight of the lead pastor there, but at the same time, make sure that we have safeguards to protect from anything that can diminish being above reproach. Does that make sense? And so we definitely do that, but she's leading the way, and especially in Asian American women leadership. She's leading the way, and especially leadership in our church from a women's perspective. She's spoken at the Nines. She's gifted in teaching, organization, administration. I mean, I just keep going on and on. You guys already know that. But one of the things that she does a great job at is when I'm not around, she's the de facto leader. She helps leads our team in staff meetings and organization, just beyond events, but team building as well. So I thought it would be great. DJ and I had thought about. A lot of us are leading teams, volunteer-based. She specializes in volunteer mobilization. You lead volunteer teams, you lead staff plus volunteers, all sorts. She's come from different sizes of churches, from church plants. Though her last, or 2 positions ago, she was working under, who's that cool guy? Lincoln Brewster. She served under him as one of her worship arts team, and so she knows leadership. She's been around good leaders, she's been around bad leaders, and she does a great job of helping those leaders out. So I definitely want you guys to welcome a special person, Angela Yee.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm so grateful to serve with Kevin. He's one of the strongest leaders that I've ever served with.
So I don't have to pay her.
And I'm so grateful to be here with all of you guys. It's really a blessing, and just seeing people who have the same kindred spirit of serving God, of pursuing God, and really wanting to do His will. So some of you probably went to seminary, and one of the things that I think most seminaries don't teach about is you never think about that you have to be in meetings all day. Like, how many of you, when you heard the call to ministry, thought about the fact that I'm going to spend a lot of my time in meetings? Did it ever occur to anybody? And so a big part of how we develop leaders, of how we manage the ministry going on, is in meetings. So what I'm going to focus on in the next 15 minutes is how do you run an effective meeting, in a sense. So think about your leadership team. I'm curious, when you have a team, like, what does it look like? Do you guys have staff, or is it volunteers? Just throw out some of what's your team look like.
Or team for like a church plant.
Okay, church plant. So volunteers.
15, 17.
15, 17. Okay, great. Okay.
There's 6 staff members.
6 staff. Okay, so paid staff, not paid.
Yeah. Yeah, paid.
Paid staff. Okay, good, good. Anything else?
My wife.
Wife, very important.
Of course. Handsome.
Awesome. Partnership type of. Great. Okay. Good.
I work.
teams come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Our churches are all sorts of shapes and sizes. And so my background is my dad was a church planter. And so basically his family, we did everything. And then I ended up in a church plant of 30 people. And so it was all volunteers, and our leadership was all volunteers. Our preachers were all volunteers, except for the pastor. And then I moved on to a church about 70 people, and there was like 1.5 staff. Then I moved to a church of 1,100 people, and there was like 5 pastors and lots of staff. And then Lincoln Brewster's church, I don't know, 150 staff, it's a lot of people. And then my most recent ones, I've at a church of about 800 people, and that was about 10 staff. So all sorts of shapes and sizes. Our team right now at Saddleback is about 12 staff, and we have unpaid interns, and then full-time, and then part-time. Okay. So as we're talking about this, think about your own particular group, and we're going to talk about a few factors to consider to having an effective meeting. How do you manage your team in a way so that you make the most? You think about the people hours around the table. That's a lot of time, right? Okay. So this. The first thing to consider is what is the purpose of your meeting? What are you trying to accomplish? So think about that now, the meetings that you have. What are you trying to accomplish there? And so the approach, an effective meeting is, the way I like to think about it is kind of like a pie chart. It doesn't have to be this percentage. But there's 3 categories that the purpose could fall in. So the first one being a church, what do you think that might be? What's a reason for everybody gathering?
Our vision statement.
Good, okay. So vision would be kind of like the middle, that would drive everything.
Okay.
So that's great, yes. So you need to know what you're about. What are we in the work of? What are churches all about?
The gospel.
Faith, the gospel, exactly. So it would be for spiritual reason to get together, right? So what would be an example of a spiritual focus for a meeting? Prayer, yes. Groups have prayed together. So it could be praying for each other. It could be praying for your congregation, right? Prayer. Devotionals, kind of what Kevin did at the beginning, right? The soul care aspect of your team.
Yeah.
So that's spiritual. Now, what is another thing that teams do together? Any other?
Logistics.
Logistics, good. So planning. Let's see, what did I call that? I believe that was task. Okay, so will be task areas. So that would be planning, calendaring. It might be developing the strategy for the vision. Right, so that's all kind of task action oriented. And then the last one would be relational. Okay, so that's about relationship. So that's where you might do things like team building, sharing with each other, getting to know one another. Okay, so those are kind of the main categories. I think just about most things that a team does together in the Christian kind of context would fall into one of these categories. Now every meeting then is up to you to decide what percentage of this do you want to do, right? So is this going to be primarily spiritual, 90% or 10%, or, so what are you trying to accomplish? So this helps you structure then your time. And it also helps you at the end of the meeting to know, okay, did we accomplish what we were supposed to do? So keeping those things in mind is really, really helpful. So part of the percentage might also depend on your leader and also where your team is and what it needs at this time. So for example, our team's pretty new. I've been on staff for 10 months, I think, officially 10 months. And I've been at the church for about a year. And in that year, of the 12 people, only 5 of the people were the same 5 people that we first started with.
They don't
So-
work for me.
Everyone's rage quitting.
My last 6 months, they leave.
Yeah,
Too
so,
many airplanes that died. Death by airplanes.
that's too many airplanes. So our formation of our team is relatively new, right? A lot of people don't know each other. So Kevin spends a lot of time kind of doing relational stuff, right? People joking around or eating lunch together or talking about how things are going. And we had somebody who was a volunteer who came to our meeting, and she comes from a business mindset. She was just like, but you guys get nothing done. You just spend all this time talking, But in reality, team building, relationship, super important. Okay, so think of those Those three things. Okay. The next thing to think about is the ground rules. When you get together, what's kind of your basis for behavior? What kind of values are important for your team? Okay, so throw some examples of values. What are some examples that a team might have?
Honesty.
Honesty, good. Authenticity,
Vulnerability, transparency.
good. Transparency,
Mutual respect.
respect, that's a big one. That's right, that's right. Not putting down anybody. Good.
No temper tantrums.
That's a great one, no temper, good, yes. So you're setting kind of these boundaries or guidelines for people to know how to behave with one another. And that will then really determine kind of the dynamics of how the group goes.
So how is that communicated? Do you guys have like a rule sheet on the wall, or what do you guys do for that?
Well,
For ground rules?
yeah, we've had discussions about it as a team. It depends on the team.
Explicit.
We, probably every so often you guys wanna do this, Mark Dever's Deliberate Church book has a good page, I got the page already sent to you. Ground rules of how to lead team meeting, like humility, laughter, humor is a big one. Respecting, encouraging. Our team tends to be very aggressive, so we have sniper marks a lot. So the leader's gotta have to reel that in and say, hey guys, we gotta use stuff with some words. But yeah, I mean, we do have a sheet, I can send that to you guys, but it comes from Deliberate Church, he does that. But then I think culture, the team culture forms over time, and we've done some exercises to help crystallize those characteristics.
And it's the style of the leader, the personality. Like Kevin's a big picture, and he's got tons. He's super creative with ideas. So this idea, that idea, or like popcorning all over the place. It's like, had this ADD feel. And then I was under an executive pastor who was just like, he was like a ISTJ. So that's, if you know what that person is, like, just straight and narrow, right? It's like every person had to be on time. If you weren't on time, you had to publicly apologize to
Yes,
them.
yes!
No electronics, like nobody except for the note taker could have a computer. So, but it was like super focused, and everybody was, really engaged and centered in those meetings. But both are really effective, right? It just depends on the leader, it depends on the team, and depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So, okay, so ground rules, values, and then the time and the scheduling part. So that's about making an agenda. Now, people have different opinions on what's an effective way of doing an agenda, and there's lots of different ways you can go about that. Sometimes it's just, hey, this is the one thing we're focusing on today, guys, and so let's just gather together and think about how that might work. Other things, like what Kevin's done is he passes around a little index card, and he asks questions like, what do you need to promote in the next 90 days? What's going well, and that way, the index cards become the agenda. Another thing that I like to do is I actually like to put the main topics on the board and then say, okay, does anybody else have a topic you want to add on the bottom? And then so that way everyone feels like they have a chance to bring up their issue, discuss. So the agenda is really helpful because it helps people see what's going on and how to keep on track. Okay, and then the board I like because you can just cross it off and feel like you accomplished something. So that feels good too. Okay, and then also the agenda is just really helpful. Everybody should have an owner, right? The person who at the end is going to say, I own this area and I'm going to do something about it.
Yeah.
Because especially on the pastoral level, it's so great to think about big picture, but how do you drill it down? How do you actually get it done? And then record and follow up. So action items are really important, but just not saying the action item, but saying who's going to do it. And then follow-up, which works differently in different teams. So one way that was really effective in a previous team I was at was we would actually write a list and then send that out via email. And then the next week, we would just print that list out and bring it to the group and say, okay, did you do so, how's this going? Gives an update for everybody. Did you have a question?
No, I'm scratching my head.
Oh, okay. Sorry. All right, so that is the part about the approach part. Now, the rhythm part, like how often do you meet, how does that look like, what do you talk about? So what Wilson was saying was we start with vision. This is how leaders think, right? We think about big picture, mission, vision, and then what do you do with the vision? What goes after that? When you have a vision. There's a step before execution. The plan, that's right, the strategy, right? You've got this big picture idea, what do you want to accomplish? Well, now you gotta figure out how to get there. So that's the strategy. And then, what Angel was saying, you get to the execution part, right? in order to do the execution, I would actually put down the planning part because that's where you put the legs. That's where you actually say, what's the specific task, when's it gotta be done, who's going to do it, right? And then it gets done, and then you got a big check mark, everybody's happy. Okay? So that's how leaders think. Now, in terms of how your team meets, it's actually opposite. Okay? So this is what, anyone read the book Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni? Yeah, great book. So he's got really great philosophy for how to carry out meetings. I find it a little bit on the corporate side. Ministry doesn't quite work exactly like that, but really great thought, so I really recommend that. So a lot of this is the modification of what he's written. But first we start with the tactical meeting. And so that would be the weekly meeting. So if you have a leadership, and you'll have to adjust this according to your context. Like if you're a church planter and it's your wife, you know, that might look a little bit more different than somebody who's got multiple staff.
Yeah.
So,
Hey, honey, it's time for the tactical meeting.
I love that.
Are we done?
So the tactical meeting is where you meet on a regular basis, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or whatever, but that's where you check in, see how things are going. Talk about what's going on this week, what's going on the next month, what's going on the next 90 days. Okay? And so this is kind of where you do you check how things are going, you do planning, you make decisions, and get the nitty-gritty of things, right? Right, and then from there, you go into a monthly strategic meeting, okay? So the strategic meeting, and that's one afternoon for like 4 hours a month. So that's monthly, okay? So the strategic meeting is where you start looking at more of the bigger picture, because from the strategic is often where you'll end up with your technical items to do. The strategic meeting might look at a particular issue, an ad hoc issue that you might have to deal with in the next quarter or so, okay? So 4 hours, this gives you a chance to focus and to really hone in on an issue or a couple of issues. Then from there is your quarterly meeting, and what we liked to do was to do it off-site. And the reason for that was because it would be one day, so a full day. So that would be where we would get out and spend a little bit more extended time, maybe sharing, praying with one another, connecting. But it really was on an even bigger level, like reviewing overall strategy. Okay, so like from the vision from the year, what did it look like? How are we doing? What types of things do we need to address? So it had the dual purpose of both the relationship building as well as the strategy part. And then once a year would be kind of the overnight retreat. We would have a staff retreat overnight. And this is where you develop vision, okay? Because this is where you talked about what's the vision and what do we do this coming year looking ahead? How does that all work together? How do we implement all of that, you know? So it really set the plan for the upcoming year. And then this plan or this vision is then what drove all these other elements. So this way, these things all line up with each other. Okay, so the vision is once a year, everyone's together, strategy, quarterly, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, that lines up. Okay, great.
One question.
Yeah.
So early on, you mentioned that this is how the leader thinks: vision, strategy, execution. And then you said something like, "But we actually go kind of the opposite direction," or something.
In terms of frequency.
Oh, frequency. Okay.
Yes, in terms of frequency. So like this is, you meet more frequently. Yeah. Okay. All right, so that is the kind of the rhythm for meetings. Now, there's a couple factors for effectiveness I just wanted to throw out there. So number one is when you think about the vision for your ministry, think also about the vision for your team. What do you want your team to look like? Kevin and I had a lot of discussions with all these new people coming on board. What kind of culture? What was really important? Think also about your personality. What's the personality of your staff? I love working with Kevin because he's so fun, and I'm more like, okay, let's get this done, right? And he's like super relational, and I'm like, okay, let's get this done. So it's like a really good balance, right? And there's other people in our team, like John's always really great, and so we have these awesome people on our team, but people respond in different ways. So knowing that it was really helpful. This table talked about being an introvert versus an extrovert, you know. And I was on a team where the introvert said, you know, when you throw out a question, it would just really help if we would just all sit in silence. No. You know? Or he said, send the questions ahead of time, which I think somebody mentioned here. Send the questions ahead of time so I can think about it. You know, that's really helpful. And then, like for me, like when I finish something, I want to do the next thing. I'm ready to move on. And so the executive pastor realized that I love like being asked to do things, right? And so he said, okay, great, action items, let's give them to Angela because she loves doing things and getting them done. So I walk out with 90% of the action items on the team. You know? But it was, we all knew each other. Our team did StrengthsFinder. How many of you done StrengthsFinder? Anybody? Yeah, it's really great to do at a team level, especially the book that talks about the 4 domains. And so we realized that we were a very relational group, right? In execution, it was only me and one other person, which is why we went with all the action items, you know? And we had really strategic thinking people, so we talked about lots of ideas. But we had nobody to influence, so we couldn't get the rest of the church to do any of our ideas. You know, but knowing all of that about your team helped us understand the dynamics of how to work together. Motivation, so what motivates your staff, that kind of goes along with the personality part. But then the leadership style also, understanding all of that. And so understanding all these types of things about your team will help you to become a better leader. And it's kind of funny because I was working at a church which was like super achievement oriented and like everybody worked all the time, right? And the leader said, you know, we really need to have fun. And so everybody has a mandatory staff fun day. We're gonna have fun and you were all forced to go. But it was good because everybody kind of needed that. So that's in a nutshell, all sorts of different ways to think about meetings and how to have a more effective meeting. And then any questions before we go into the process? Yeah.
As kind of an action-oriented person, obviously you're doing a lot of stuff. And I have a couple people on my staff that are like that. I'm just curious, what do you appreciate? Like, what are the things that you appreciate when like your pastor kind of reaches out to you in a certain way, or when do you feel like what you're doing is actually making sense to everyone else on the team, and yeah, you feel appreciated?
Yeah. So it's different for everyone, but for me, I like to know if someone cares about me. You know, like Kevin will just come by and say, "Hey, how you doing? You know, just checking in on you. How's it going?" Because I worked on the leaders, all they cared about was about getting the task done, and then I just feel like being used. You know. But once again, it's different for everybody. But I know for me, as a very high productive output person, somebody who's caring for me and for my soul, it's really good.
Just a quick practical question, like when you're doing the strategic or the quarterly, you still do the weekly? And are you?
No. Yeah, so like 3 weeks is tactical and then 1 week is the quarterly.
Right, so that kind of replaces the.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, great question.
So I think the overnight vision, the tactical, I get that, in terms of the differences in the agenda of the meeting. Can you talk a little bit about the quarter and strategic, like how does that look at a meeting?
Yeah, totally. Okay, so like at the overnight, we said these are the 3 top priorities that we have this year. One is improving our worship services. One is deepening discipleship at our church. Number 3 is creating amazing outreach opportunities, right?